Nicola Sturgeon has announced a ban on households mixing in Scotland, claiming experts say the restrictions introduced in England by Boris Johnson do not go far enough.
Well, Scotland's First Minister joins us now live from Edinburgh. Good morning to you, Nicola Sturgeon. This is a step further than what Boris Johnson has announced in England. You are going on the basis of the same scientific evidence, and we heard the scientific advisors saying we have to break unnecessary links between households. But I can imagine that for residents of Scotland, this is extremely dispiriting news, a ban on households mixing, because you risk isolation, loneliness, lack of social contact. You know, we know that people's mental health is affected by this crisis as well as their physical health. Making such draconian measure is a big step.
Absolutely, it's really tough, and I haven't done this lightly. I should say there are exemptions for people who need care, childcare, extended households, couples who don't live together. So we've been very careful to try to take account of the mental health implications. There's more flexibility outdoors for young people, but I've made a judgment that we are again at a tipping point with COVID. I'm looking at data that alarms me, frankly, and if we don't act now urgently and decisively, then we might find COVID running out of control again. So the judgment I've made, and it's not an easy one, is that if we take tough action now, we might actually manage to be under these restrictions for a shorter period of time than we will end up being if we delay that action. So these are tough judgments, but I think given the loss of life we know that COVID can result in, the health damage that it does, we've got to be prepared at moments like this, people like me, to take tough decisions and to be prepared to do things even if they're unpopular for the greater good. And
the clear implication, though, First Minister, of what you've done and what you've just said is that the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who is a fact at the moment, seems to be running England, that he is of a different view, having seen the same information. So clearly you do not think that England is going far enough by definition.
Look, I've tried all along not to criticise other leaders who are taking decisions. We're all grappling with the most horrendously tough judgments just now. I can only look at the situation in Scotland, and I can only speak for the judgments I am making. And my advisors say to me that, yes, a curfew on pubs is certainly something that should be done, and we've taken that decision. But in and of itself, it is not going to be enough to arrest this increase in COVID cases and bring the R number down and bring the epidemic under control again. And that's why I made the difficult judgment yesterday to go further. Now, I should say that the household restrictions we've introduced, they have already been in place in large parts of the west of Scotland for the last few weeks. These kind of restrictions are in place in large parts of England right now and Wales in areas of higher transmission. We know that it is within domestic household settings that the virus is most likely to spread from one household to another. And I think that makes sense to most of us, because it's really difficult in our own homes to comply with physical distancing, to have good ventilation. It's easier to regulate public indoor spaces. So that's where the risk is. And my advice...
So what's the strategy here? Is it a new strategy to eliminate the virus by separating households? And as you've already said, you're not completely separating households. There will be a huge number of exemptions, which means that households will still mix. So you won't be able to eliminate the virus. We're all social beings. We need to be in contact with each other. It's the very essence of being human. At what point do you then lift that restriction and risk the virus recirculating again?
Susanna, I wish I could sit here and give you the definitive answers to this. We're dealing with an infectious virus. It's an accelerating global pandemic. As yet, we have no vaccine, although hopefully that will change over the next few months. These are judgments and sort of difficult decisions to flex our response that people like me are going to be faced with for the next few months. So we have to try to strike the right balance. You asked me about elimination. I've always said our objective should be to suppress this virus to the lowest possible levels, as close to elimination as possible, which is not eradication because that takes a vaccine, in order that, as we did during the summer, we can drive it as low as possible. And then when things get tougher again, going into winter, which is the case now, we are dealing with a rise in cases from a lower base. We're in a tough spot in Scotland, across the UK, many parts of Europe right now, but we're in a stronger position than we would have been had we not worked so hard to suppress the virus over the summer, if we didn't have our test and protect system in place. So the efforts and sacrifices of the last 6 months have not been for nothing. Lots of lives were saved because of those sacrifices. We're in a stronger position than we'd otherwise be, but we're going into winter.
A lot of people are feeling, personally very discombobulated by all this, and increasingly so. And they'll have woken up today and thinking 6 more months of this. This is now, it'll be over a year by the time, even if that time scale is met. I was struck by something you said to the Scottish Parliament yesterday. You said, although it doesn't feel like it now, this pandemic will pass. It won't last forever. One day, hopefully soon, we'll be looking back on it, not living through it. So though we're all struggling with this, and believe me, you said we're all struggling, let's pull together, let's keep going, try to keep smiling, keep hoping, keep looking out for each other, be strong, be kind. Let's continue to act out of love and solidarity. I will never be able to thank all of you enough for the sacrifices you've made so far, and I'm sorry to have to ask for more. But if we stick with it and we stick together, I do know we'll get through this. I was moved by that, I'll be honest with you. I feel that a bit of empathy like that from leaders to the people right now goes a long way, because a lot of people really don't know what to think.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I'm in a different position to other people in Scotland because I'm having to lead this effort, but I'm a human being. I'm an individual citizen. I'm separated from my family. I'm struggling with these decisions. This is the toughest stuff I've ever faced. We're all struggling with this. It's nobody's fault. I don't think we should be trying to blame each other. Our experiences are all different, but we're all in it together and we will get through it. Previous generations have gone through even tougher things that lasted years, the Second World War, for example. The one thing we know right now is that this virus will pass. We don't know exactly when, but it will pass, and there will come a point, hopefully soon, when we'll be looking back on it. In the meantime...
Would it help, Nicola Sturgeon, if... one of my issues with it all, that I don't feel there's enough of a global effort with everyone coming together, and I don't feel there's really a concerted message of consistency in the UK. And I understand devolved government responsibility, of course I do. But is there an argument to say that given the scale of this pandemic and all the repercussions, that it doesn't really help to have England doing one thing, Scotland doing another, Northern Ireland, Wales and so on? Is it unhelpful to people's thought process if they're thinking, well, we're all one thing and yet we're not? And it depends where you are.
I agree with you. I think globally there should be a more coordinated response. This is a global pandemic. It doesn't respect borders and boundaries. And yes, I think we should try and coordinate as much as possible across the UK. But ultimately, I'm the First Minister of Scotland. I can't outsource my decision-making. I've got a duty to the Scottish people. But, this is not a criticism, incidentally, but many times I've been on here and you've invited me to criticise the Prime Minister, and I have declined to do so, because we do need to try and work together. We're all grappling with the same things. We'll come to slightly different judgments and decisions. In a way,
you don't have to criticise him, because by doing something completely different, you're making it very clear, given you've seen exactly the same data from the same people, you're making it very clear by your decision-making that you don't agree with the British Prime Minister. You don't really have to criticise him. Your actions speak louder than words.
Well, what's the alternative? I don't do things that I think are really important.
I think you should do exactly what you think you should do. But I think the fact that you're not directly criticising him, if I'm looking at this objectively, like most people, you're saying, well, by your actions, they're doing the talking for you. You clearly believe, from the information that you've received, that a lot more serious draconian measures need to be taken right now than Boris Johnson does. It's self-evident, or he'd be doing the same thing.
I believe that what I have announced, difficult though it is necessary. And I'm responsible for my decisions and I'm accountable for my decisions. That's why I'm on here and will stand up in the Scottish Parliament. I'll do a daily update today, because I think it's important for leaders not just to say to people, here's what we want you to do, but try to be clear about why we want people to do these things, what the rationale and thinking is. And I can only take my decisions and answer for them. I can't, I'm not...
There's one thing that I wonder what you would like to answer is about care homes, because we've had a massive issue with people being sent home from hospital to care homes and the numbers of deaths that happened as a result. The Health Secretary says that we put a protective ring around care homes, but in Scotland it's a devolved issue, NHS, social care. You've had a terrible issue with care homes, 2,000 deaths in Scottish care homes, for the same reasons, actually. Do you think that that was a massive mistake? And is it something that you've apologised to the Scottish people for?
Many times. I'm sorry for every death that has occurred. These things will stay with me for the rest of my life. And the knowledge that decisions we took for the best of reasons, based on the information we had at the time, influence all of these things. No leader worth their salt carries that lightly. I think if we could turn the clock back, there are things in many aspects of the handling of this pandemic, including in care homes, that we would undoubtedly do different. We were dealing with a new virus. Things like asymptomatic transmission, we didn't understand as well then as we do now. And we've made a lot of changes along the way. And as we go into winter, certainly a big preoccupation of mine and the Scottish Government is how do we protect people in care homes better, perhaps, than was done before. One of the things that means that, yes, we are in a difficult but stronger position now is that we know more about this virus. We don't know everything about it, but we know more than we did back in the spring, and we've got to use that knowledge to try to make sure that our response takes account of that and is as good as it possibly can be.
And how often do you talk to Boris Johnson?
Not perhaps as often as we should. Michael Gove tends to do more of the Four Nations dialogue. I'm not knocking that. The discussions are useful. I spoke to Boris on Monday. I participated in the Cobra meeting yesterday. Monday was the first time in quite some time that I'd spoken to him about COVID. And one of the things that all of the devolved administrations have been pressing is the need for more regular Four Nations discussions. If we want to have a more aligned approach, we need to talk.
It does seem quite extraordinary to me. Sorry to jump in, but it does seem quite extraordinary to me that the First Minister of Scotland is not in regular direct contact with the British Prime Minister, particularly given you're taking different decisions to the ones that he is taking for England. I mean, I just assumed you'd be talking all the time.
Maybe, and perhaps that should be the case. Look, it takes two to talk. I am perfectly happy to have more regular dialogue. The dialogue that takes place is useful. And this week, even although we've come to different decisions, I think it has been better this week that there has been more of a communication and engagement. So I'm not arguing with that at all. Ultimately, I have to take my decisions. The more alignment, the better. And where we take different decisions, the need to be clear about that. I think we can overstate the potential for confusion. Most people in the UK know which part of the UK they live in, and what matters, whether in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, is that you listen to the government where you live.
But the key thing is you're all looking at the same data, you're all hearing the same advice, and you're making different decisions based on it. That's what I think is causing the sort of anxiety amongst people. As well, why? Why is Scotland going much harder? Are we not doing enough in England? That's certainly what I'd be thinking. Listen, First Minister, we really appreciate you coming on. As a rule of thumb, you come on pretty much whenever we ask you to be accountable for your decision-making. We have not had a member of the UK government on here for 148 days. Do you think that's a dereliction of their duty to the electorate, i.e. our voters?
Yes.
Our viewers, I mean.
Yes, I think that's pretty disgraceful, actually. I think particularly at a time like this, we can't be on all programmes all the time, and no doubt there'll be programmes watching this that think, why am I not on there? I get that. There's a limited number of hours in the day, but, generally speaking, particularly at a time like this, leaders have to be accountable, and not just accountable, we have to be explaining the decisions we're taking. We're asking people to do extraordinary things, and if we're not prepared to explain the reasons for that, then we can't expect people to comply. So it's not just about political accountability. Right now, communicating directly with the public is a real public duty on the part of leaders.
They should end this boycott.
Of course.
Thank you, First Minister. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.